Let's get started. Matthew, Brileigh, it would be great if you guys can introduce yourself. That would be a good starting point so that community knows exactly what you guys are doing, and then from there we can get started.
All right. Well, Brileigh and I work as duo, a team at JuiceBox. So we're two contributors at JuiceBox DAO. And mostly what we do is producing educational materials, and we produce a podcast, and we help announce product features and updates. So we're basically trying to work to make the protocol more legible. So trying to help people understand how JuiceBox works and how you might be able to use it. So yeah, that's basically how I would describe our roles at JuiceBox. And we've been there for about, I would say, the last year, give or take. We were in the community a few months before that, but yeah, we've been contributors for about a year. So
Sounds good.
So Matthew and I both joined JuiceBox about a year ago, and before that, we both actually came from a fine art background as photographers, but then we were kind of at a transition point wanting to, because in the traditional art world, there's a lot of barriers in place, and so when we were learning about crypto, it seemed like a lot of these traditional institutions had ideas turn on their head with crypto, so we were really pulled into these ideas of decentralization when it comes to finance, or how organizations are structured, or how products or tools can be community owned and governed, and all of these new ideas being presented. So we got really excited and have been working full-time in crypto since 2021, basically. Yeah.
Super. That was nice and concise. Thank you, Matthew and Brileigh. I'll quickly get started. I mean, I have this. I've been and you guys are, as you guys are part of DAO, right? So it brings to me to this question is that, I mean, the space is evolving. The overall space is evolving. How do you define the role of communities in this ever evolving space? What's your perspective on how this human element influences the tech landscape, especially like projects like us, like JuiceBox and the Douglas?
yeah, that's a great jumping off point. I think, specifically in terms of how we think about community at JuiceBox is really like JuiceBox is community owned, so it's never taken VC funding. So the way that JuiceBox got started is that JuiceBox was the first project running on the protocol. So JuiceBox itself is a JuiceBox project, like the DAO is a JuiceBox project. So it was initially developed as software that was basically designed for a problem that the two founders, Perry and Janko, wanted to solve. But then from there it grew into a larger thing as other people started using it. And so there was never a point where JuiceBox was put forward as a business or as any type of, it was never a question of venture coming into the picture. So it was always the community that used the JuiceBox protocol that would, own the JuiceBox protocol and be able to govern the treasury. So it's kind of from the beginning, I think, a big part of the core values of JuiceBox. And then in terms of what you were talking about in the human element, I think one thing that's notable or interesting about JuiceBox is that we have a banana mascot named Banny. And so from the beginning, there was this collaboration with an artist named Sage Kellen, who designed these characters and illustrations that would run throughout the site. So there's all these kind of fun and quirky pieces of art that are throughout the site. And so I think that was actually one of the things that a lot of people really liked about JuiceBox, is that it had this kind of quirky branding and a lot of art thrown into it. So there was always kind of this like human element behind the tech, even though the contracts are actually very complex, and a lot of the front end is also quite complex, and there's a lot of technical thinking behind the scenes, but there is always this kind of human element to the art. And I think the other thing that I would mention is that Brileigh and I co-host the JuiceBox podcast, and a large part of what we're trying to do with the podcast is telling the stories of people who are making projects on JuiceBox. So it's sort of a way to bring storytelling into the mix so that we can show that, a lot of projects are anon or a lot of contributors are anon. So it kind of helps to tell the stories and in some cases bring a face, or, you can hear people's voices and it helps you connect with them a bit more. So yeah, those are maybe a few thoughts. I don't know if Brileigh, you want to add anything?
Yeah, I might just pick up from where you left off with the mascot Banny, which was developed by Sage, and there's an assortment of other juicy characters that you'll find when you're looking at some of the materials on the website and in the Discord and other areas. And I feel like Banny helps to humanize the protocol because he represents, each and every one of us when it comes to like approaching a JuiceBox project. There's some characters that suggest a certain nervousness or apprehension, which can in some ways represent that apprehension we all face when we're going, off-road into these Web3 projects. We always talk about Web3 as sort of the Wild West when it comes to getting into the space and getting onboarded. There's a lot of new things that we're venturing into, but there's also a lot of other aspects of Banny that can be, very bold and very confident, or sort of punk in many ways, with the studded collar. We're, doing things that haven't been done before. So I feel like the mascot and a lot of the other characters that are present within the JuiceBox brand kind of help to humanize the protocol and make it relatable to each and every one of us.
Got it. That sounds great. I mean, I overall, to be very honest, I love the branding. Now I think it's not just Banny. There are a lot of fruits on the platform itself, on the protocol design itself. Like, I mean, in terms of UI and everything, I see there are a lot of fruits there accompanying banana. But really love the branding that you guys have, right? It's definitely welcoming, fun, right? And we also have this owl, which essentially represents, all the contributors in the ecosystem in the dub list are like owl, right? They're finding new projects. They're going down into the deep, wild west of crypto and finding out new projects and gems from the darkness and presenting them in front of others. So that's the core of the story behind. We have this owl as our spirit animal and as our mascot. So yeah, good to know that you guys have this element in branding, which essentially makes it more welcoming, and people actually like it. People do love it because it's more human, more fun in that case. Super. Thank you for that answer. Now coming to the as you mentioned, right? Community is for us also. It's been at the center of how we designed entire mechanism, how projects can get curated. The community is at the center of it. And while you are also building, right, this community and the protocol, you're contributing to it. You might have come across some challenges, right? Can you please share, the hurdles that you faced in nurturing the JuiceBox community and how those experiences have helped you grow as a protocol and as a team, as a community?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think one thing in terms of the Juicebox community is that one of the challenges was that it initially formed during a really euphoric moment of the bull market. So most people have heard of Juicebox because of Constitution DAO, which, as we know, was pretty much a top signal for the previous market cycle. So there was this really intense euphoria at that time, and a lot of people coming into the community very quickly, which is actually harder to deal with than a community forming more gradually and more organically. So all of a sudden there were like thousands of people joining the Discord and wanting to know more about JuiceBox because they had heard about it or interacted with the protocol through Constitution DAO. And so there were some people that even bought tokens as a result of the Constitution DAO madness. And so they bought JuiceBox governance tokens and were all of a sudden they had different expectations, let's say, for what they would get out of that. So I think that was a bit of a challenge, just like the really sudden growth. of the community. And the other thing that I would bring up in terms of the challenges that JuiceBox faces specifically is that a lot of times the success of projects depends on their ability to kind of rally a community around their project. So the most successful projects on JuiceBox kind of come to JuiceBox with a community already formed. And if a project doesn't have that community already built up before making their project, it can sometimes struggle to get people contributing to it. So I think that's one thing, is that we get a lot of really interesting projects that come in that have really ambitious plans and things that they want to do, but they don't always necessarily have this community already built up. So we kind of have to try and help them, find those people who would be interested in what they're doing and would like to contribute. And that's often difficult at a moment like this, which is the complete opposite of when JuiceBox got started. It's the complete opposite of the November 2021 madness. Like, we're at more of a low point in the market, and interest in crypto is kind of waning, and a lot of people are, the only ones left now are kind of the hardcore crypto enthusiasts. So it's sometimes a little bit harder to kind of like drum up that community and find support for projects. So I think that's one thing that we sort of struggle with is just finding the people who would be interested in the projects being built on JuiceBox, and just trying to help project creators find those people. So I don't know, Brileigh, you have any thoughts along those lines?
Yeah, I definitely agree. I mean, I think with any like startup in crypto or any organization, like it's a challenge to build community, and the word community can be tossed around a lot, but like what it means to have one that's actually thriving and genuine and aligned on something is really hard to build, and it takes time and a lot of hard work to build that up. So I think one of the challenges, as Matthew said, with JuiceBox is like, if you're launching a project that's brand new, like it will take time to bring in funding because you need to build trust with people. You need to tell your story and like grow the audience and the community of, whatever the goal is that you have with your project. So these are things that are difficult, and, they require some patience. They require a lot of time to grow and actually like come to being fully realized.
Got it. I mean, I have watched the Constitution DAO very closely. So it was definitely a success. It was a huge step. What we were fighting for was actually very massive. So definitely, I think in that sense, JuiceBox did a great job of bringing community along and supporting that auction itself. Was a massive step. We didn't succeed in getting it, but I feel that step itself was the stepping stone of what JuiceBox is today. Uh, and it was definitely a great success, right? I mean, a lot of people came to know about JuiceBox and the overall, initiative that was take JuiceBox. I mean, what Constitution DAO was trying to do with it. So, so that was great work in terms of coordination, in terms of bringing community together, and then funding something that has a tangible value in terms of holding the copy of the constitution. So that was a great step. It was brilliantly done, to be very honest, and the community did a great job at it. Now coming to, I mean, obviously, uh, we recently announced something, and I'll probably get into that side also. So we have built a product which is essentially which, I mean, at the base, the Dap list has this community which is curating projects every week, and people are voting for these projects, supporting them. And top five voted projects get listed to the platform on the platform. Now, using this as the base, we have built a product which is a white labeled product for chains and infra projects that they can integrate into their own system. So think of like, any chain, like let's say Polygon, Gnosis, ZK Sync, or any of these L2s or any L1 like Aptos. They can use our white label solution, and they don't have to essentially curate their own ecosystem. They just plug into that service, and map the domains, and it lives on their own platform itself, where the community can contribute from there, also contribute community can contribute from our platform itself. And this community contribution, community driven curation is something very important. And since the beginning of the Dapolis itself, community, as I mentioned, community was at the core of it, right? How do you see? I mean, like one way is essentially this platform is adding ton of value to their community also because their community gets to interact. One way is essentially this platform is adding ton of value to their community also because their community gets to interact. They have the power now to make a decision of what kind of projects they want to showcase that are building the in that particular ecosystem. They can control that, right? And also they have a voice to essentially support the projects that they like, that they think are good. They're adding value into that particular ecosystem. How do you see this concept? I mean, the core of it is essentially curation, but how do you see? I mean, did you like the idea of it? Have you read about it already that we have built? From what I've explained right now, how do you see this concept enhancing the overall ecosystem curation as a platform or as a community? Because that adds ton of value for the people who are now joining in. Because that's what you mentioned, right? A lot of people are not in the ecosystem right now, but it's more of based on cycles, right? So people come in, people go, and it all gets filtered out after a point, and then new people come in and then they leave. But having a continuous updated system, updated platform where they can explore new projects makes a lot of sense. But how do you see this concept enhancing, the overall interaction and the curation of the ecosystem? Let me know if you want a little more detail on of what exactly Synergy is as a product. But yes, happy to hear your thoughts on it.
Yeah, I mean, I think it makes a lot of sense in terms of the way I see it anyway, is that it's also a way um, for people to get a sense of which dApps might be trustworthy as well. Like it's about discovering things that might be useful to people, but I think it's also about communities being able to vouch for protocols or for certain products that are safe to use, because obviously there's a lot of security concerns with using dApps, and I think the question of what is safe to use is just as important as what is useful or what can do this or that. So I see that as being huge, and then it's also cool that the community is able to vote on these things rather than a centralized arbiter deciding what is going to be listed or what is going to be upvoted. So it kind of takes us away from sort of that like advertising model of like, oh, well, you can pay to be listed on our service, and instead it says like, well, the people who are in this community are able to decide what is listed and what is put forward as a legitimate project that people should check out. So I think that's very cool. JuiceBox does have something a little bit similar. It's obviously not nearly as ambitious as this, but we do have a section on our homepage where the community can vote on projects that'll be featured on the homepage. So we have like a little section called Juicy Picks, and then we'll run a Discord poll around once a month, and anyone in the community can vote on which projects they think should be featured. And so we'll have, I think it's maybe 4 or 5 projects that will be featured on the homepage. And again, it's sort of a similar idea of taking what's out there and deciding as a community, like, okay, we want to put these forward. We want to, feature these projects and kind of highlight them. And it sort of ties into, again, like what we do with the podcast, where we're talking with people making projects and we're sort of helping to tell their story and bring it forward. So, yeah, I don't know if Brileigh, you have anything to add, but yeah, those are a few thoughts.
Yeah, definitely. I think on-chain reputation built by like a community is like what helps verify like if it's trustworthy. Like when it comes to every JuiceBox project, like you can get a sense of how trustworthy it is, or you can evaluate it yourself based off of how it's configured. You have the wallet that created the project, how much money they want, the story and what they're raising money for. But in addition to that, there's the community element we have like an activity tab. And so you can see who is contributing to that project. You can see the wallets. You can leave comments about why you're supporting the project. So this helps, I think, people understand who else is supporting this project, which is kind of similar, I guess, to the DAP list, where you can see who is voting on this, like what people what people are supporting this project, which people are voting on, and based off of how you trust or don't trust other people in the space helps verify that project as like a legitimate protocol or tool or whatever it is. So yeah.
Superb. Thank you, Matthew and Brileigh, for that. Yeah, I mean, to be very honest, what we wanted to achieve, and I think you have perfectly mentioned all the points. The idea is to showcase projects, give power to the projects, and to also support these ecosystems with curation of their individual ecosystems while they all sit together at the main platform also. But on top of it, also give power to the community so that they have the voice. They have the voice. They can decide, right? And it's very important to get that essentially from the community itself, because they are the main part of this entire tech itself, right? The community. I mean, that's the thing that keeps us separate from what Web 2 has been all this while, right? Community tech is definitely there, but the community makes it completely different from what it was previously, because they have now a say. They can decide. They can tell exactly what they want, even from the protocols, from the projects, and I think that makes a huge difference, because as a human, that gives us freedom to decide. That gives us freedom to essentially speak up or share or support others. So yeah, thank you for summing that up. So we talked about community, and we talked about protocols and how communities can add value to this entire ecosystem. Um, while we talk about community, um, I feel that for Web3 as an ecosystem, or blockchain or crypto as an ecosystem to thrive, inclusivity is something very important. Bringing in people from different communities, from whatever the inclusivity of bringing everyone in the ecosystem is something very important. Welcoming people. How do you think? I mean, how can we ensure that the power? I mean, not exactly power, but how can we ensure that the community, the diverse audience that is watching us from the outside, uh, can essentially join in, and they feel that they are welcomed into this ecosystem, and it isn't limited to just techie people, right? So I think a lot of non-tech people from the outside itself, they get feared when they see a lot of technical things happening, and they stay outside. How can we essentially make it more inclusive, for the non-tech folks as well, and also like for people from different communities also? How can we make it more inclusive in nature?
Yeah, I think that's a really, really important question. I think a good start is to really pay attention to how you're talking about your protocol, and that could be anything from website copy to marketing materials. Like I think crypto does have a bit of a problem of getting too used to a vocabulary that's very niche. And I think that a lot of us talk in a sort of like techno babble that is legible only to people that are kind of inside our community. So I think we just need to be careful about how we talk about things. So with JuiceBox, we have this problem all the time because the protocol underlying the JuiceBox.money front end, it's very complex. It can do a lot of different things, and it can be used in a lot of different ways. And a lot of the terms are very kind of arcane and obscure. So a lot of what Brileigh and I do is almost trying to like translate that to like a more normal point of view that isn't so deep in the weeds. So a lot of our work is kind of like, if I had to explain this to someone who's never heard of what we're working on, how would I explain it to them? And so it's kind of like distilling down some of the concepts and trying to find words and vocabulary and analogies and ways of thinking about it to build mental models that isn't bogged down in the crypto terminology. So I think more broadly, like a lot of crypto apps have to think about, well, if someone doesn't already care about decentralization, or they don't already care about blockchains, or they don't already care about this stuff, like how do we build products that are useful to them? Like how do we build things that do something for them that is useful? And I think that's really at the core of it, is not being so caught up in crypto for the sake of crypto, and thinking more broadly to how can these dApps unlock some superpower, unlock something for the end user. And I think the Reddit NFTs are the perfect example of this, where they are on the blockchain, they're on, I think it's Polygon, and no one cares. Like everyone on Reddit is just stoked because they have this way to trade these profile pictures, and there's this community that's formed around them. And the blockchain is, and the wallets and all of that is running under the surface. And the only thing that matters is the user experience to Reddit users. And they've been super successful. And I think this is probably the model for how Web3 apps can go more mainstream, is by abstracting away a lot of the crypto infrastructure and the wallets and all of these things, and making it more about the end user, their experience, and what they're able to do with the dApp. So yeah, those are a few thoughts. I don't know if Brileigh, you have anything to add?
Yeah, it kind of reminds me, we had a guest, Kenny Miller from Studio DAO, a decentralized movie studio running on JuiceBox, on an episode of our podcast. And one of the things that he said that really stuck out to me was that, Studio DAO is trying to build a blockchain-based experience. But in the long run, that's not necessarily something that everyone is going to care about. Like when the 10 millionth person joins that Studio DAO project, it's not about, the tech that's underlying. It's about how this tool unlocks something new for them. It does something for them that they couldn't do before. It makes something easier for them that they were already trying to do in this new way. So I agree with Matthew that, abstracting away the tech and, all of these details about how something works, and just making more about the experience and what this technology is unlocking for people, is like what's going to help onboard people that are non-technical or don't care about the tech. They just want something that helps them with something that they're already trying to do, or presents a new way of going about something.
Got it. Thank you guys for that answer. And I think inclusivity in terms of not just tech, non-tech, but bringing in people from different geographies, welcoming them into the ecosystem itself. Web3 overall has been very welcoming, but I see that we can do a lot more. There's still a lot of room to improve, a lot of things to fix, bring people from different places in the world to the ecosystem, and then give them the power to decide to do anything that they want, right? Give them the freedom of essentially expressing themselves, and then yeah, I mean participating in the ecosystem itself. So yeah, I strongly agree with you guys, and I think the collaterals, how your documentation, your community is overall designed in terms of your server, Discord server or Telegram, or your website. How do you communicate things? I think it makes ton of sense, and that itself can make a huge difference in terms of how people get onboarded and how people, whether people like it or not, right? So great answer there. So now that I talked about communities, and we also talked about inclusivity, there are obviously whenever you have community in the picture, there are some valuable lessons that you learn from them. Are there any instances where JuiceBox as a team have learned something from the community's feedback that has influenced a pivotal decision or a project direction, or maybe even basic, but it was impactful? anything that you have learned over the period from the community feedback, community's interaction, and that has essentially helped you build in terms of product or protocol?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think the two main pieces of feedback that a lot of JuiceBox users have given us is that we need L2 support. So I think what you were talking about with the global reach, I think one thing that we need to keep in mind is that Ethereum mainnet is not very accessible to the average user in the world. And just because of the transaction fees, they're very high. So I think we also need to think about like who is able to use the protocol based on which network it's on. And so one of the things that we're going to focus on going forward is getting the JuiceBox contracts deployed on other chains. So this is a little bit more complex with JuiceBox than, say, deploying Uniswap. Like, it's reasonably simple to deploy Uniswap on a new chain and add front-end support. JuiceBox is a little bit more complicated because JuiceBox DAO itself is always the first project launched whenever there's a new contract version or a deploy on a chain. So there's some tokenomics issues in terms of how the projects relate to one another on different chains that becomes slightly complex. And in terms of where the treasury is and all these types of things. So there's a few complexities to that. But long story short is that we know that we need to get the contracts on Polygon. We need to get them on Arbitrum. We need to get them on Optimism or Base or all these other chains so that more people can use JuiceBox. And also, it kind of can also unlock different directions for the product because, for example, on mainnet, it doesn't make sense for you to give $5 to a project because the gas fee is going to be $10. But if you're on Polygon and the gas fee is only 5 cents or 10 cents, then all of a sudden that $5 payment actually can make sense. So it can unlock different ways for people to raise funds because all of a sudden they can accept micropayments. They can take in a $2 payment, a $5 payment, a $10 payment, which is huge. That's like a totally big, that's a big unlock for the average project because it can open up new tiers of accepting funds. So that's one important thing that we're working on, not only multi-chain support, but also cross-chain tokenomics. So we have some things in the works that it's a little bit complex to explain, but there'll be ways for you to stake project tokens on one chain and possibly receive a portion of the reserve tokens or other rewards. But it'll also be possible to stake on one chain and receive rewards on another chain. So there'll actually be this idea of JuiceBox treasuries operating on multiple chains at the same time, because the cross-chain compatibility is like a big crypto kind of point of friction, and we have some interesting ways of solving those problems. So I think over the next probably 3 to 6 months, we'll see some progress there on the multi-chain and the cross-chain stuff. So that's definitely one thing. I don't know if Brileigh, do you have any other ideas?
Yeah, I would just add that in addition to cross-chain compatibility, is to make the user experience like easier to use. Like, that's something that we're always working on. We have a contributor, Strath, who is just our UI UX designer, and we're always trying to simplify like the way the homepage is laid out or the way the project page is laid out. And right now we're working on a create flow that helps just make it easier for people that don't care about all of the customization or don't care about all of the advanced tokenomics features. They just want to be able to launch a quick project, whether that's to fundraise or kickstart a DAO or whatever it is. So I think that's another important thing, is being able to have sort of like an easy mode and an advanced mode for people depending on like where they're coming from and what their goals are.
Superb. I think that highlighted some great points because, yes, main chain does have some issues in terms of onboarding everyone. People who can spend definitely can use main chain, but to invite the masses, you need you need L2s, you need people to spend less on gas and spend more on funding, maybe, right? That makes a huge difference because then people knows exactly what value they're getting in return, right? Otherwise, they're paying more in terms of gas than the funding, right? So it does make sense. Yes, token economics, when you have multiple chains supported, it becomes very complex. but I believe JuiceBox will do a great job at it, and we are excited to see what changes come to the protocol, to the DAO in that sense, and we'll be tuned to learn about those updates. But yeah, those are some great points that you mentioned, right? And I think having L2s also included and other L1s and L2s makes a lot of sense because every chain can have its own sort of a stronghold, not exactly stronghold, but yeah, somewhat like that in different regions, right? Let's say for Polygon, India has been one of the strongest base. Now it's global, but yes, Polygon has a strong base in India and other developing countries in Asia. Uh, so it does make sense for you guys to cover those, and I think that's the reason. Even on our platform, also most of the things interactions are off chain. Why we have kept it that way so that more people can participate. Um, on chain interaction on Ethereum would be very hard. We do have some plans to make these results go on chain, but off chain makes it more accessible for anyone and everyone to participate. And any which ways you can verify their signatures, right? You can see the proposals as well. It's everything is living on IPFS, so you can verify those details. But it makes more sense to have it off chain because then people don't have to spend on every interaction, which makes their life easier. But yes, there are now ways to essentially optimize that as well, and we are also thinking of making things on chain. It will probably take time, but yes. But yeah, keeping it off chain was the main reason was to welcome everyone and anyone and everyone to participate and help and support the projects they love, um, and in return, essentially give alpha to others and get alpha as well. Now that brings me to the last question, and that would be from my side and to the others who are in the space. There are great folks in the space right now, and I'll be more than happy once I'm done with this last question. I'll be more than happy to welcome you on the stage. If you have any questions for Matthew, for Brileigh, for me, anyone, and any questions specific to JuiceBox or the product that we have recently launched, we will be more than happy to welcome you on the stage, and feel free to ask those questions. So yes, my last question for you guys would be is, I mean, JuiceBox has empowered some of the very bold projects. One of them is essentially Constitution DAO. It was sort of very pivotal for the entire ecosystem, how fundraisers can be done, how people can raise capital to support these initiatives. It was pivotal in that sense. Uh, how has community driven approach influenced innovation and collaboration within the project itself, hosted by the Juice Box?
Yeah, I mean, I think definitely Constitution DAO was sort of this moment where there was almost like an internet flash mob. That's kind of how I would characterize it. So there was just this all of a sudden this viral moment, and you could see people coming together. And the whole, ethos behind that project was that instead of one billionaire owning the Constitution, there would be all of these people from around the world that would collectively own it. And I think that message was powerful and it resonated with people. And then as a result of the memetics of the project, like it became this meme with Nicolas Cage and all these other things. So it led to the success of the project, I think, really was based on the meme worthy quality of the actual idea. So I think that that example of Constitution DAO then led to other projects that also followed in a similar line of thinking, in my opinion. So I think a notable example would be Moon DAO, which came about 2 months later. So that was in like January, February, like early 2022. And they were initially going to raise funds to by a moon rock, but then later expanded to kind of a more broad vision of decentralizing access to space research and exploration. And so they raised funds to kickstart their DAO. And then one of their first projects as a DAO was to actually send a DAO member to space. So on a Blue Origin flight. So again, kind of like this outlandish goal, a little bit like buying the Constitution, which then kind of becomes a meme. So yeah, we're going to send a DAO member to space, which, they actually are going to do. It's a real thing. And so I think this idea of like the community coming together around like a shared vision is like a really powerful kind of meme that can then proliferate and lead to, these huge moments of capital formation, which we've seen with other projects like Assange DAO or, other projects that have come together around a shared goal. So that's kind of how I see that. Like with Constitution DAO, yes, it was about buying the Constitution, but it was also about this bigger idea of collective ownership. It was about bigger ideas of challenging, a billionaire owning something that really should be a public good. So I think in a lot of ways, even though Constitution DAO was about the Constitution, it was also about, community and collective ownership. It was also about what is a public good, like defining the Constitution DAO as a public good, and saying that it should be not in the hands of a private collector, but instead in the hands of the public that has a connection to it in some way, whether they're American or not. So I think that idea was powerful. I don't know if Brileigh, you have anything to add?
Yeah, I think the governance aspect is a huge part of the community. Like one of the biggest value props for protocols in crypto is giving power to the users to actually make decisions about how these things run. Whenever you send payouts from your project on JuiceBox, you pay a 2.5% protocol fee and you receive JBX tokens in return. So in other words, the community that uses JuiceBox also owns JuiceBox. And, you don't have that on other platforms that relate to money. If it's crowdfunding with like Kickstarter or Indiegogo, you're paying a fee, but it supports the costs and the salaries of a select few and doesn't benefit the broader fundraising ecosystem as a whole. So I think JuiceBox really encourages people to think about the power of collective action and community ownership and how we can make decisions on the tools that we use and need to use every day in our lives to fund the things that we need, in life or in the organizations. So I think that's like a really important value of JuiceBox.
Super. That sounds great. Thank you, Matthew and Brileigh, for answering my questions. It was a fantastic space. Thanks a lot for everyone who attended us, or listened to us. Right. I have something to mention. I would like to appreciate Pixel Pool. He did a small, very little thing, but very sort of like wholesome thing, right? He mentioned that he is curating projects on the DAP list in his bio, which is great to see. Thank you, Pixel Pool, for that, and thank you for contributing to the ecosystem. And to everyone, I mean, even if you don't have that on your profile, also, thank you a lot for joining in and contributing. And thank you, Matthew. Thank you, Brileigh. Thank you, everyone, for joining. It was great space, and enjoy your day, enjoy your evening. Take care. Bye bye.